Hi again, everyone, and welcome to Badger Breakdown. I'm Mike Lucas for UWBadgers.com. I'm joined by the voice of the Badgers, Matt Lepay. When you take a look at this matchup, a lot of people had circled it prior to the start of the season, not knowing exactly what might be on the line, but there should be no shortage of emotion in the stadium on Saturday.
No doubt. It's a good rivalry that's built up over the years. You look at what's happened the last couple of years in particular. Ohio State brought an unbeaten top-ranked team here 2 years ago. We know what happened. Last year we know how it ended, back and forth, a wild finish. And there's still a division championship here to be won. But I think the rivalry itself, senior day, all that goes with it, makes for a pretty good show. I think we'll see on Saturday.
Well, it's one of the many storylines, really, going into this ball game. You can't ignore either the opportunity for Monte Ball become the all-time scoring leader as far as touchdowns, and that'll be something that people will be talking about at least leading up to the kickoff.
1 to tie, 2 to break. Travis Prentice, the former Miami of Ohio running back with the record, and adds a little bit more to it. I mean, you just the game itself is big, and it's going to be a tall order, I think, to get the record against an Ohio State defense that maybe at times has not played as well as people thought it would, but it seems to be rounding in the form. And you just look at the athletes on that side of the ball, you can't help but be impressed.
Don't you think the Buckeyes offer a much sterner challenge than some of the defenses this year that might have comparable numbers? I think when you look at personnel, you just single out certain teams, and this is one of them.
Yeah, a couple of their defensive linemen, John Simon, people have been singing his praises for a while. Jonathan Hankins inside in a league where there's a lot of good defensive tackles. I think Brett Bielema has unsolicited talked about how impressed he is with him. Hankins is a load. He's about 320, 325 pounds. You look at the linebacking core, Ryan Shazier. They've talked about him a lot and how he's raised his level of play. At every level, they have very gifted players, but when you think of Ohio State, the names that come to mind first for me on defense would be Simon, Hankins, and Shazier, and pick any order you want.
This is not an elite Ohio State defense. Urban Meyer would be the first one to tell you that. All you have to look at the point totals. But it's a quality defense. And the real challenge for Wisconsin now is to prove that it can run the ball against a quote-unquote quality defense.
Yeah, they've gone through some injuries there. In fact, they've used Zach Boren, a fullback, to play linebacker for Ohio State. Yet it's been a tough team to kind of figure for me at times. Ohio State, it was fortunate to beat Purdue, did so in overtime with a backup quarterback. Kenny Guyton came in, led them to tie it at the end of regulation, won in overtime. Shootout with Indiana, two teams that Wisconsin dominated. Yet Ohio State went to Lansing, beat Michigan State, handled Nebraska, pulled away, and won going away. So bottom line is they've done enough to win. They've done enough to stay perfect, and that sets up a pretty good matchup on Saturday.
You almost get the sense that Ohio State feels more comfortable taking on an offense like Wisconsin, where it could be smash mouth because of the strength in the middle with the defensive tackles. We'll find out on Saturday, but some of the spread teams have really hurt them.
Yeah, that's we did the shootout with Indiana, a game where it's low 50s versus high 40s. The Nebraska game for a while, it looked like it was going to be a shootout, and then Ohio State ran wild. Nebraska really struggled in that game. It's interesting though, Mike, when you look at Ohio State on offense. It's a team that probably not to the degree of Indiana with that up-tempo style, but Ohio State can press the gas pedal a little bit too with Braxton Miller, Carlos Hyde, the receiving core that the Buckeyes have. But they can push the pace, to use a basketball term here. Again, they can push the pace offensively.
I know people have been making comparisons, or at least trying to, between Terrell Pryor and Braxton Miller. From what I've seen of Miller, though, he's just a very special athlete. Not that Pryor wasn't, but he just seems to bring another dimension above and beyond what Pryor did.
He's grown up quickly, or so it seems, Braxton Miller has. And I've wondered during the course of the year, and I think a lot of folks have wondered, how is he going to handle all the hits? And he's taken a lot. I mean, he has meant so much to that offense. He's not as tall as Terrell Pryor. Pryor was more of a long strider as a quarterback, a guy who could run the ball very well. Miller he's 6'2", but a solid 220, 225 pounds. And a couple of times it looked as though when he was knocked down, that he wasn't going to get up and may stay down for a long time, but he does. That Purdue game in particular, it looked like it was going to be serious, but he was back up, and the kid is very, very tough.
One of the other storylines that, we really can't give you the insider's account on is because the coaches don't talk about it very much publicly is Urban Meyer and Brett Bielema. But It'll be built up that way.
Yeah, well, sure, it's natural because of what what transpired in the recruiting season and the reaction to that. I think both coaches would tell you it was, if not overblown, maybe taken a little bit out of context. In the case of Brett, I think a lot of people really misunderstood where Brett Bielema was coming from. But I think both coaches would tell you it's more about it's the programs, it's the Badgers, it's the Badgers and the Buckeyes. I just think you look at the last couple of games in particular, really the last 20 years, there's not a great deal of separation in this series in the last 20 or more years between Ohio State and Wisconsin. But you just look at the last two games in particular, they punched each other in the gut. Ohio State was top ranked here 2 years ago. Wisconsin looked like it was going to have a miracle comeback of its own, only to see what Ohio State was able to do in the final minute. That alone sets a pretty good stage.
And that was also kind of the springboard for Monte Ball, who didn't play in that game and redefined himself as a running back. One more storyline, and we can't ignore it, is Curt Phillips making his first career start here in Madison.
Yeah, he played. I thought he did everything that they needed him to do against Indiana. You just try to put yourself in his world, how excited he must have been last week in Bloomington in a big game. It was a game that clinched a berth to Indianapolis for Wisconsin. The passing numbers were what they were, but he hit one when he absolutely had to in a big conversion play, a throw to Derek Watt. He ran the ball well. He blocked a little bit. But, yeah, coming into Camp Randall Stadium, he'll be real excited. He'll want to send those seniors out on a big note. He's one of them, but hopefully one who will be coming back for another year.
And one last quick note on a senior, because we don't talk a lot about specific defensive players very often when we tape this, but Mike Taylor, when you think how far he's come, to overcome the types of injuries that he had early in his career and the level of play that we've seen out of Taylor at linebacker in each of the last two seasons.
Yeah.
It's pretty special.
Yeah, Brett talked about that the other day after the Indiana game. It just that name comes to mind so quickly, what he's had to go through and his perseverance. It's been pretty well documented with Monte, what he has gone through. Mike Taylor, maybe because he is rather far removed from the knee injury, from the ACL, some folks might forget, but I think he's worked himself into a guy who's going to play in postseason All-Star competition where the NFL scouts are going to get a better look at him. Somebody who may not be on a lot of the awards lists necessarily, but I think people who watch the game really appreciate how good he is.
For Matt Lepay, I'm Mike Lucas. Thanks for watching Badger Breakdown.